All right. It looks like we're live, and so hopefully we are. Hi, Michelle. Welcome. My name is Stephanie Kunkel, and I am the founder of Perspective Shifters Hub. And I am joined today by Michelle Cheyne. Is it Cheyne? I've always say it.
I kind of let it slip, but it's Cheyne.
Okay, see, now I know for sure. I've always said Shane, I think, or Shane, and then it's like I go back and forth, and I do this a lot with people because I think I know, and then it goes anyway. So Michelle is the founder of the Wisdom Seekers Society, and also a resident expert on the Perspective Shifters Hub. So I'm really excited to have you here today. And I want to kind of introduce everyone to what you do. So other than professional rabbit hole diver, what do you do, Michelle? And let everybody know kind of what your experience is and what you do.
Well, that's pretty much sums it up pretty well. I love rabbit holes. What do I do? Okay, so I come from a psychology background, which was mainly around psychometrics, which is psychological assessment. There are other kinds of psychometrics definitions as well, but specifically I did a lot of psychometric or psychological assessments and interpretations and things around that. I also studied law and combined law and psychology within my graduate and postgraduate degrees and did all that stuff. At the moment, I am just an insatiable, curious rabbit hole diver that want to create and bring together really a tribe of people that are interested in more than just what's in front of them. So yeah, interested, curious, octopi usually that have 3 hearts and 9 brains and 8 arms.
That is fair. What I love about it is that you're not just going down the rabbit holes yourself, right? But you're bringing other people along, and that's what I'm not only the founder of the Perspective Shifters Hub, but I'm also a member of the Wisdom Seekers Society. For anybody that's questioning, and I love the space that Michelle is creating on a regular basis, and it allows us to explore some elements that we might not be able to explore in a traditional business setting or in a traditional class. We go to these different classes, and we work on different skill sets to help us elevate our lives and elevate our businesses and elevate ourselves from a conversation standpoint. But Michelle really focuses on a lot of the spiritual aspects of things and really just getting to know yourself. And you offer sessions called Disentangling You. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So most of work, or I am trying to make most of my work play. So to play with ideas and to move forward and change things up. So there's usually some kind of structure, if loosely even, in the tribe or the society. But on the other hand, I also like to have conversations with people about things that are entangling them. So whether it's in business, I have done quite a bit of work in websites and SEOs and content and all kinds of things like that. So sometimes you just need a different set of eyes or a sounding board or someone that thinks a bit differently than you, because we can get really stuck on what we're busy with and we don't always see it from a higher vantage point, or sometimes even in the details. So that's my Disentangling You sessions, and they are not as structured because I think they're each very unique in what needs to happen inside of them.
Yeah, and I think that really resonates with some messaging that we've been working on from the Perspective Shifters Hub around meeting people where they are. And I think that it is so critical, as whether you're coaches, whether you're leaders in the business world, whether you're salespeople and you're meeting your customers where you are, whatever that looks like. We have to start meeting people in the moment, how they're showing up that day, how they're showing up in their life, and then advising them in a way that makes sense for them, and not necessarily pushing our own thoughts and agendas and things like that in the place of where they need to, and really just being that sounding board and that piece of support like you were just talking about. Okay, so tell me a little bit, how did you get into this field?
So my main brand, which Wisdom Seeker Society is kind of the tribe, the membership, the platform kind of side of it, is called Instinctive Living. And I remember it so clearly. I was still living in South Africa. The kids were babies. I was busy. I think I just started doing medico-legal work. I of course, we both have a big interest in human design. So I have this very interesting channel called the Channel of Struggle, I figured out the other day. Yeah. So I tend to do things the difficult way. It is in my design, apparently. And so as I do, I was doing my honors degree in psychology. I think I wrote my second last exam. I was pregnant the last year of it. So I wrote the exam just before my daughter was born. And then I wrote the next exam when she was a couple of months old. So it was quite intense. And then, of course, when my son was born, I started doing medico-legal work, which is a little bit of a different approach because you're using a lot more specialized assessments and things like that, and report writing of a lot bigger and interpretation. And when he was 3 weeks old, and I remember so clearly, we were living in the mountain or very close to the mountain, and it just came to me like instinctive living, but I didn't know what to do with it. Like I was busy working as a psychometrist in independent practice, and you can't call your business instinctive living when you are like so when we moved to the UK and I realized that I wasn't going to get employment in a space where I could still be there for the children and create, a life that we really wanted to have, I realized I needed to go and do something on my own, and instinctive living was waiting, and then kind of took shape. So most of what has happened through life has been kind of instinctive from an intuitive perspective, not the okay, I'm scared, I'm going to run away kind of instinctive, more reflective, and then kind of seeing what is really happening. So yeah, that's pretty much how everything's gone from content creation into now the Wisdom Seekers, into trying to show people how magical they are, and that it isn't about fixing or changing or becoming something else. It's really about often pausing and taking in what there already is, which is difficult if you're not in a happy space. It's not so easy, but it's also not always productive to think that there's something wrong with you. So yeah, that's pretty much how it came to where we are now.
Yeah, and I'm really partial to what you're doing, probably because my own history, from the depression to the leadership journey to everything else, and I think just in general kind of society, and I think it's probably worldwide, but we tend to have that idea of what's wrong with me? Why can't I be happy? And just coming to this radical place over the last few months between your platform and kind of doing my own work within the Perspective Shifters Hub, just coming to this radical acceptance of there is nothing wrong. It's just a moment in time, and that's just where we're at and how we feel. And I think that happens, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or share your own opinion, but I think that happens when we're kids and our parents don't want to see us struggle or cry or be upset or be angry or, be unproductive, right? And so it's, what's wrong with you? Why are you behaving this way, right? And so we get it in our head that there's something wrong with us, and then we're constantly trying to fix that. And I think the opposite of of treating depression and fixing depression is this radical acceptance of it, of just saying, oh, I'm not feeling like myself today. How is that? Why is that? What do I need to do to feel more like myself and less, like this? And maybe that's nothing in this moment. Maybe I just need to sit with it and feel this way for a little while. Yeah. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful conclusion to come to. I think society works in a way that we have been taught that we need to be a certain way to be right. And I think some of us have figured out that maybe there is no right and maybe there is no wrong either. And that is the choice. So, yeah, maybe there's something wrong with society and not us.
Right. And I always kind of go back to the idea of, morality in general, is kind of, it's perception.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a hard thing for us to have a conversation around, with everything that's going on in the world right now. But I do believe that it's a perception. So we have to kind of decide, and that's one of the reasons that through the hub, right? One of the first courses that we take people through is that identification of what their values are and where they stand in the world and what's important to them, because you can't, I've learned at least, you can't influence other people, whether it be from a leadership perspective or an entrepreneur perspective or whatever, if you're busy trying to appease other people. You kind of have to know what your values are and what is important to you before you step out in that, which is difficult for us 5 lines. Anybody who's watching that knows human designs, both Michelle and I have our 5-line profiles. So that's an interesting thing. So I want to just kind of talk a little bit about South Africa. You were born there and you were there until the kids were really young, and then you moved to the UK.
Actually, I was born in Namibia, so it's
different
history. Yes, so it's the country just above South Africa. At the time when I was born, though, it was under South African rule, so it was called Southwest Africa back then. But my parents were born in Southwest Africa, and so were some of my grandparents. And then we moved. This is Louis the Fly. Told you.
Michelle has a pet fly.
So I moved down to South Africa when I was 7. I actually was doing passport renewals last week, which is 500 million forms that has to be filled in, and you have to write down everybody's ancestry from who knows when. But so we moved there in April 83, and I left South Africa in April 2015. So most of my life was there. I went traveling quite a bit after I didn't complete my law degree, and I kind of went on a bit of an extended working holiday trip, spent some time in Europe and California, and then came back to South Africa and eventually met my husband there, and the kids were born there. And then politics in South Africa is a little bit out of control, and we needed to find, better opportunities, and safety is the main concern. It was for our children. So we kind of had to decide between Namibia, which is my ancestry, or England, which was my husband Scott's ancestry.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So we ended up here. It would have been much warmer if we decided on Namibia.
It's interesting. It's in the 40s where I live today, so I can appreciate that desire to be in the warmth a little bit, for sure.
Yeah. And Africa, I think, Africa is in your blood. You cannot get it out.
I'd imagine not. I just want to remind our viewers, so this is an Ask the Expert, Ask Me Anything. If you have questions for Michelle, please put those in the comments. She's happy to answer. almost anything relative to to what we do. She's pretty open like I am. So we're in the Wisdom Seeker Society. We're reading a book right now. Have you started on the book?
I've just started.
Okay.
I was thinking about it today because I wanted to chat with you about it. But I think it's this thing that I just always leave things to the last bit and then I rush it off. But I think, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's at the last bit. I mean, we're at the 10th of the month, so we've got quite a bit, right? Yeah. But I just downloaded it today. And remind me what the title is. I know it's by Kyle Gray.
That's right, Raising Your Vibration by Kyle Gray. And I've started listening to it a little bit, and it's actually something that he did when he was, putting this book out there, was about letting go, isn't it? And working on that, raising your vibration, so that, we get stuck in the, I'm a word, it's not how I'm going to do this, and the hows and the stresses, and we end up attracting that. So I'm really looking forward to really diving deeper. Our theme in the Wisdom Seeker Society is energy. And I think there's a lot of topics to go, around the energy, the bigger one. I just secured our Wisdom Whispers for next week, is going to be around the Akashic record. So that's going to be quite interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I've heard about it a few times, but I haven't kind of went through that. But I am excited about that. I have this idea that my passion for Greece, that I don't know where it came from, might be due to some Akashic record stuff. So I'm excited about that. That'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I can't wait to introduce Suzanne Gamache to you guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what both of us are doing, whether in the Wisdom Seekers or in Perspective Shifters. It energizes us both, I think, to make these connections with these amazing people and to share what they do.
Yeah, I was talking with a potential expert last night, and we were talking about, why I started the Perspective Shifters platform. And a lot of that is because over the past few years, I've been exposed to amazing experts in many different types of fields. And in my own personal history of career, if you will, I've always been kind of that person that ends up being the go-to person, which I'm sure you can kind of relate to that, right? Sure. But people have questions, they need something, they want to know who to go to. They come to me first because I usually have some sort of repository of information that I can, or if I don't, I know who to go to get it, right? And so that was kind of the thought process in part of the Perspective Shifters Hub, but in so much more than that, I've been exposed to these amazing people, and I have so many people in my life that I want to share them with, and bring them to a place of saying, come with me, meet this amazing person, and get information from them, and also recognizing that, as we were talking about earlier, kind of in that mindset of, of being in a place where things are always a struggle, right? And we can't let go, right? Yeah. Recognizing that people need an affordable option to get exposed to these people. And that, if I brought you all to all of my friends, they'd spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on every single one of you. And a lot of us just don't have that money just laying around, right? So how can we make it affordable? And even if it means that we all chip in and we all work through the group coaching and the webinars and, those things, and it allows everybody to get a taste of all of the amazing experts that we have on our platform. And I think it's kind of the same way with Wisdom Seekers is, every time I turn around and you're doing an event, I get really excited because it's an opportunity to meet someone new that can give me that piece of information that can help me to move through, whether it's a spiritual aspect or communication aspect or whatever that looks like, and really just diving deeper into who I am. So, just a really quick thank you for that, because that space is really important. And I think the group that you've curated within what we do is just it's a group that's incredibly special and near and dear, I think, to all of our hearts. So
thank you. That's very cool. Well, I strongly believe that we all we have that wisdom, within us, but often we need people to remind us, and sometimes only, it's like a frequency thing, that we only hear a certain frequency. So someone that comes in might not trigger that for you, but it might trigger it for someone else. And so we have to play around and see how we can trigger that inner wisdom and bring it out for each person themselves, instead of pushing it on them. Yeah.
Which is really the purpose of instinctive living, right? It's really about tuning into ourselves and not so much everywhere else around us, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot of noise.
Yeah. So I want to dive into that for just a second. Let's talk about that from a 5-line perspective. Because one of the questions, I'm in a group of 5-1s, which is my profile type for human design. And if anybody is watching this and they don't know what human design is and they're curious about it, and they're like, what is a 5-line? What is this type? I have no idea what you're talking about. There is a session happening later this month for Introduction to Human Design on the Perspective Shifters Hub. Let us know in the comments if you'd like an invitation to that, and we'll send you the link. But as a 5-line, it's kind of our role to be projected upon, if you will. And one of the questions that came up in this group that I'm in for 5-1s is that we like meeting new people because it gives us new projections. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, because I had never really entertained that thought, but it came across my feed this morning. And I think it's something that is interesting. Would you, when it comes to tuning into our inner wisdom and our instincts for ourselves as 5-lines, what does that look like?
That's a very interesting kind of thing to think about. I definitely identify with it a lot. I have been, especially after last month, we had the Be Heard was our theme, and we dove into it from a dialogue perspective. So kind of Johan Botha was, kind of shaping that. How do we become a space? So in that space, we need to let go of us so that we can really hear and facilitate, if you want, the other person's voice. And I think that might be very much what a 5 maybe does well. I don't know.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. No, well, and I think that's the piece, right? Is the facilitation, right? We have to kind of get to a space where we're able to have those conversations internally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
because there is, with the 5, there is a lot of mirroring. You see me from your perspective within that me as a 5.
Yeah.
Not because I change, but because I project you unconsciously. Yours is on the conscious, isn't it? And mine's on the unconscious. I'm a 3-5 and you're a 5-1.
Yeah.
So I like to experiment with the 3-line, but then with the 5, I often find that I lose myself in projects or other people's dreams and things. Which
we've kind of talked about that a couple times, haven't we? But I think that that's pretty common, and it's something I've been talking about for a while. Is and I always attribute it to the people pleasing, rejection sensitivity from the ADHD side of my, psychological brain. And, but looking back, I think we do that a lot. And I think, for instance, I was just at a family reunion this past weekend, and, it definitely is pretty interesting to watch the way that I behave and the way that I show up in situations where, there's a lot of expectation and a lot of projection. And it was an interesting kind of, I don't want to say experiment, but that's kind of how I felt that it was this last week. Because I was approaching it from a different lens. And I think that's really what the perspective shifters idea is all about, is really taking a step back and recognizing that we all come to the table with our own lens of experience. And, and maybe that was a lesson that I had to learn, because I am a 5 line, of realizing that everybody's going to view each other through their own lens of experience. And it doesn't really matter what we do.
There's something very interesting there. I'm having a conversation with Saffron as well tomorrow about the Enneagram and about kind of the spiritual side of that. So I don't know, maybe what would be the karmic implications of our human design? Is it maybe what we bring with into this life that we need to, complete for the next round?
Yeah. And that's a really interesting question too, because I feel like, we talk about that from a human design standpoint, about like, why are we here and what are the lessons that we have to learn? And it's interesting because as I've been diagnosed ADHD, one of the lessons that I've been told that is in my human design chart is peace and consistency. And I laugh because I've kind of put another label on consistency. A lot of people think, well, it's the same thing day after day, which sounds incredibly boring and lame to me. So I kind of am like, you know what? My consistency looks different than a lot of other people's. It might be the same thing in a month or the same thing in a year. I'm pretty consistent with how I show up, but I'm not very always consistent in my actions. But I don't know that that's required of me. When I think about human design and the things that I do, I just, the things that I've learned by being in your group and exploring this side of me with Nicole Magic and, just the different experts that we have on the platform that are more spiritually oriented. I think it's been an interesting revelation of just, I was thinking about this last night, of going, okay, let's raise our vibration, right? Let's manifest all the things. And then also this radical acceptance of, I actually have no control over this shit. So it doesn't matter how much I raise my vibration, it's still going to happen however the hell it's going to happen. I just need to put myself in a place to be able to receive that and be open to it and look at it from a different perspective. And I think that's kind of where we land when we have these types of conversations. Every time I'm done, I'm like, oh yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. And
exactly. Yeah. But that shift in perspective. When we did the mirrors and mantras a couple of months ago, that was for me like, wow, why is this so difficult? Like, why can't I look myself in the eye? Like, this isn't right. And now it is pretty cool because you can, and your mantras or your affirmations that you wrote on the mirror, they were gorgeous. And so we grow a little bit through those discomfort zones, because otherwise just would never do it.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. That was one of the things that that I learned through Nicole. But even as I'm sitting here now, like we did our affirmations 2 months ago, I'll say. And I put them up on the bathroom mirror and they've been sitting with me. And there's a couple of them that's like, that just doesn't feel right anymore.
Yeah.
And, the affirmations need to change. And for anybody who's watching who might be in a place where I was when I first heard about affirmations and the power of affirmations, and I wanted to throw up a little bit in my mouth and roll my eyes. There's some real science behind this. The reticular activating system is an element of our brain, and it actually works to keep us safe, right? It's our fight or flight response. And one of the ways that it helps to keep us safe is it actually looks for evidence to prove us right. So one of the analogies that a lot of people use to explain this process is that if you've ever bought a car and you never saw that car on the road before, and now you've bought it, and now you're driving around and you see it everywhere, that's your reticular activating system kind of telling you, hey, look, you made a good decision, right? It's everywhere. It's there. And it's it's kind of where unconscious bias comes in too. And we talk about that a lot, especially in the DEI space. But for me, the reticular activating system was kind of this place where in that space where I was like, let me throw up in my mouth because affirmations are not going to fix all of the problems that I have in my life. Understanding that brain seeks to prove you right. And what you believe is truly what happens within your life, and what you see evidence of was life-changing for me. And it didn't happen overnight, right? And I'm still working through beliefs that don't serve me anymore. But it is something that once you understand that your brain will actually look for evidence to say, hey, that's a good decision or that's not, based on your past experiences. That's where we land. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people, we do a lot of conversations on different social media platforms around trauma healing and shadow work and things like that. Because again, this is all of our perspective. We come, every little thing that has happened to us, whether it was something that someone said, something that they did, a way that we perceived something, it can land with us and create a trauma within us, even if it's not a trauma type situation with other people. If it's, a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's not a trauma. For us, it can be, and it can be perceived. And as we sit with it, it manifests itself in ways that where we avoid certain behaviors, or we do certain behaviors to avoid feeling that again. And I just think it's so interesting because that reticular activating system for mantras and affirmations can literally get rewired and show us a whole new realm of possibilities. And again, if you had told me this 13 years ago, I would have told you probably a big F you, because that was not, it was the weight of everything. There was no light from that point, right? I call it the black hole for a reason. And so being where I am now, I can tell you that this work of actively looking for things to prove the opposite of what you believe is work, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
So. Yeah, and there's also a lot to say about that, bringing that unconscious, conscious, through whatever we do, and a lot of that has often to do with that shadow, and realizing that the shadow isn't the bad guy; it's just another part that we need to integrate.
Yeah. And I think that's again, we go back to the morality piece. Is there really a good and bad? Because if you look at it from someone else's perspective, their behaviors may be happening because it's the only way that they can be good. Right?
Yeah.
And it's not, like I said, it's not an easy conversation to have right now in everything that's going on in the world. But I do believe that, one of my favorite lines came from Anne Frank.
Yeah.
That despite everything, I still think that we do. And now it goes, woo, my train went completely off the rails, but I think everybody knows what line I'm talking about. There's good in the world, right? Despite everything, I think that everyone is still good. And I do think that is, it's an interesting perspective. And even when we're in a situation where someone has really harmed us and really filled our life with trauma, understanding that they do that for whatever reason that they feel like, but they're doing it thinking that they're doing the right thing. And it doesn't mean we forgive them. It doesn't mean that we continue to expose ourselves to it, but it gives us a different perspective.
Yeah. And Viktor Frankl, I don't know if you've ever read A Man's Search for Meaning. I think that book, I was a teenager on my grandmother's farm. I read that. I remember it so well. And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Logotherapy was his main thing. He was also in the concentration camps. Oh, my word.
Hello, Louis. Or Louis. It's Louis, right? Hello, Diana.
Oh, cool. Oh. And he was saying, you can do anything to me, but, my power lies in how I respond. Hello, Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It is so much in how we respond, right?
So that's where the difficulty, and that's where I was just doing a 4-month course also with Saffron around kind of archetypes and Enneagram, and it's like we need to pause a little bit sometimes and just kind of feel into that response, because it's such a automatic thing that we do. We just respond, and it isn't always the best way forward.
Yeah. I was listening to, there's a lecture series on Buddhism 101. And I really enjoyed the lecture series. It was sometimes a little dry, if I'm being completely honest, but there were a lot of really good nuggets. And one of the nuggets that we talked about was the second arrow. If you're familiar with that thought process. And for those of you listening that might not be familiar, the idea is that when something happens and we have an emotion or a feeling that comes up, we have the feeling and it lasts for about 90 seconds. And where it gets to be that long lasting, or that second arrow, that second piercing thing, is when we dwell on it and we don't feel the feeling. And one of that piece around feeling the feelings was something that I think a lot of us don't understand, that we call feelings our emotions. We give them labels of sad and angry and those things, but really they're actual physical feelings that happen within our body. And they are a reaction. And what we do with those physical feelings really takes us on the journey for dealing with any sort of conflict or frustration or external stimuli. Even if that's laughter, our laughing in response to something that our internal system finds funny, or maybe even it gives us anxiety, right? Because some people don't laugh because it's funny. Our internal stimuli or external stimuli that gives us that reaction, we have a choice in the matter, where once we've laughed, now what do we do, right? Do we seek that out more because it was funny, as my kids often do? Or do we avoid that because it was actually anxious laughter? And that really has to determine where in the body you're feeling things. How does your body respond to things? And I think it's incredibly important to recognize that if we don't feel it and we immediately go to processing it from a brain standpoint in our minds and our thought patterns, then we continue the loop. Right? We continue the same old thought processes and the same old traumas. We just kind of regenerate those things for ourselves without realizing it. So,
and that is a whole different kind of conversation that we've been bringing up in the Wisdom Seekers as well. And I think we need to, chat about more, because, aspects like grief and stuff like that, they don't just take 90 seconds. And yes, you are reliving things, but it's something to not make a judgment either of yourself or how you process.
right.
Yeah, because we quick on judging ourselves more than most
I
other
agree.
things. Yeah,
I definitely agree. Grief is an interesting, I don't want to call it an emotion, because it's not a feeling, it's a process, I think. And every single person processes grief differently. And there is a myriad of emotions that come with grief. And I think that is, it's a very complex. I have an expert that I'm connected with. His name is Anthony Casablanca. Sorry, Anthony. If you watched the beginning of this, you know that I don't do well with last names. But Anthony and his brother wrote a book after their years in the funeral industry. And also within corporate leadership and sales even. So one of the things that I really appreciated about their book was that they not only walked you through that process, but also kind of what that can look like. So if you're listening to this and you're a business leader and you're like, oh, we don't have anything within our organization that talks about grief or how to handle it, what types of things that we need to do to support our people. That's a really great book. It's called The Dying Art of Leadership. And I highly recommend it. But yeah, it was a great read, and it definitely shed light on kind of how our brains and our bodies process things like grief, and how every single person is so different and so unique in that process. And it's not the same with every grief or with every grief process either. You may process a death in the family in one way, the loss of a job in another, the loss of a pet in another. There's so many different things that happen. And just a very interesting concept, I guess, if you will. I don't want to call it a concept, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. And yet important for us to explore, I think.
Yes.
Because we bury these things and we don't talk about them, because this is business and this is life and this is personal and that is that, and it's so many boxes that I really feel strongly about, mixing it up and becoming the fuller version of all of us ourselves. Yeah. It's like I got so frustrated when I was doing the whole job searching thing. It's like, oh, your CV has to be specific to what you want to do, what you're going to do. It's like, yes, I know, but I'm not just that, It's an interesting aspect, and I think that's why I think we both also love the octopus movement so much, because that and through what Perry's doing, there's so much more to us as humans than just whatever the one thing is that we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it is. I think job searching is probably one of the most frustrating things for anybody out there. It's tedious, and it's, honestly, I remember several years ago, I was looking for a job and I went to an interview, and we have the questions, how does this career fit into your career goals? And I'm like, you haven't hired me yet. It doesn't. And, it's not the right answer. It's not the answer that they're looking for. And I think that's one of the challenges with honesty. We were talking about grief, and I think, we can go back to where we were talking about how we don't want to make anybody feel bad, right? So a lot of times we shy away from that conversation at work because we don't want them to collapse into tears and we don't want to cause more heartache. But it is, after reading that book that I was talking about, The Dying Art of Leadership, that's one of the things that they talk about is kind of facing this head on. Like, you can't just sweep it under the rug and pretend like this person's okay. But I think the same is true when we're looking for a job. You can't just expect someone to tick all of the boxes and fit perfectly within the box that you're developing, because even if that person is going to do that, chances are they're doing that because they've been told to. The state of Wisconsin puts people through job training. Like, if you lose your job and you go on unemployment, you have to do all of this stuff for, getting a job. And they will directly tell you that you should take your resume and you should spruce it up and you should exactly use the words that you're looking for in whatever job description you're looking for. And, and think about things like, well, if you're looking for a job in childcare and you were a babysitter, call it childcare. And, there's a difference in opinion here for me. And like you said, like, especially I would say anybody that's watching this from Perry's group and the octopus movement would probably agree with us. That is conforming people to boxes that they don't fit in. We don't fit into boxes. There's another book that I read called The End of Average. And it talks about how there is no average.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. It's just, that's a statistical thing, but there is no such thing. There is no average person.
It's the same as Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal. That's the same concept. It's like, what is normal? Like, where we are and how we are because of whether it is past traumas, even ancestral traumas, cultural things. There's so much more to the person than whatever the job description is, or whatever the role is. I mean, we are so much more. I don't know. Yeah. In all aspects. And then in the Wisdom Seekers as well, I'd really love for it to be such a safe space where people can just talk about this stuff without projection, because there also doesn't need to be judgment in when you say something. I don't need to validate you in what you are saying for you to have your own viewpoint. But I can create the space for you to be heard, maybe only even by yourself, really, because often people don't voice their points, their views, because what if it's misstrued, or misinterpreted or whatever. But they never then really create it either, because they don't use
Well, and I think that that's part of the reason that we don't process our emotions the way that we could in society, because we have this idea that, we're not supposed to process in a certain way, and there isn't a one way. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was so intent on bringing you in, why you're on the advisory board for the Perspective Shifters Hub. It's really about the fact that you do create spaces that are safe for people to just be themselves. There's no judgment. There's no, we have a lot of internal judgments, I think, that all of us bring to the table, Diana and you and me and all of the rest of us. And I call Diana out because she's here watching with us. So, but we all have these internal judgments that we bring, and oh gosh, I probably shouldn't have said that. But there's no conversation about that because it's not there. It's all internal, right? There's no external judgments from people within the Wisdom Seekers Society. And part of the reason that I have you on the advisory board is because I want to create that within what we do for the Perspective Shifters Hub too. And just be a safe space, and a safe space where we can have really challenging conversations too. We can talk about things like, there's a policy at my work that I don't agree with, and how do I have that conversation? Or I'm an entrepreneur and I have this message that I want to share, but it's not conventional. How do I share that? How do I put that out in my own voice? And really helping people to become perspective shifters without judgment, and help other people come to the table without judgment. I think, if we could have a world where there was less judgment, we'd probably be in a very different place.
Well, wouldn't that be nice if there was no us and them, if it was just us?
Yeah.
It would be much more peaceful. There's some really sad things going on in the world at the moment, and all I see is us and them. There's no unity in,
and also a complete deflection too around, there's a lot of pain in the world right now too. And until we heal that, we continue to create more. And I think that's
maybe even just feel it,
good point.
I don't know if we can heal it, because it's so into us, it's so ingrained in us, but we're also not feeling it because we're pointing fingers at, but they shouldn't be here because, I don't know, whatever the narrative is. But just feeling into it and going, sure, this is, it's heavy. Sometimes it's heavy. And I think around this time at the moment, things are heavy.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Okay, so I have one final question to kind of close us out. And if you're watching and you've gotten this far, if you have any questions that have come up, please put those into chat. And obviously, when we're done with this question, we'll go ahead and close everything out. But Michelle and I will be around, and I will tag Michelle if you comment, or she will respond to any questions that you have. But Michelle, what would a perfect day look like for you?
Wow. Well, it would be next to the ocean where the water is warm, in my hammock, having a coffee to start the day off with. Yeah, most of it would be having interesting conversations and talking and creating. I have a house I dream of, and I go visit in my meditations, and it's got a beautiful space in it for just creating, whether it is content or painting or drawing, which I also love. Finding that house is my mission.
Yeah.
And to live there, and create there with my family, and having spaces. There's little pods on the property where people can come and be as well, with a big vegetable garden and all these things. Big fire pit down below by the tree on the sand. So a perfect day would be there, and it would include wisdom seeking and creativity.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate everything that you do for Instinctive Living, for me, for the platform, for the Perspective Shifters Hub, everything that you do for all of us. Thank you so much for everything that you put in your heart and soul into. And I know you're creating space in many different ways. You're creating space to be creative and to really find ourselves. So appreciate that so much from you. And with that, I am going to go ahead and end this live stream. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Diana, for popping in. Appreciate you and love you very much. And we will talk with you all later.